Hey guys, and welcome to another episode here with us. My name's Yvonne, and today we have Evi. And Evi is a UX researcher, camper van builder, candle maker, and climber based out of San Francisco. She's originally from Toronto, where she studied industrial design from OCAD University. She jumped straight into the digital design movement after graduation and has since lived in New York City and San Francisco. And what I love about Evi is that she spent the last 8 years really mastering her craft of research and design. So in this episode, you'll really see that. You'll really see her passion. She'll really dig deep into what good design really is all about, as well as living a life that is passionate, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's entrepreneurial. She's entrepreneur in the way that she is, but that doesn't mean it has to relate to a business. And I really wanted to highlight this experience for you guys because she's full of zest for life. She has so many hobbies. I think she can hardly count everything that she can do. And generally she just loves the work that she's doing at Flexport, which is the company she works at. So she'll really shed a lot of light in terms of like bringing that sense of responsibility, that inspiration, and that passion to work. So without further ado, we have Evi. Evi, I am so thrilled to have you here with us. I am so excited for this episode because I think you have so much zest with all of your passions, your hobbies, and the projects that you're bringing to life. So thank you so much for being here with us. I want to kick things off with something a little bit lighter, and just by asking generally, like, how are you? How are you feeling today?
I'm pretty good. I've gotten adjusted to working from home. I think the first few weeks were really difficult. Actually, when the stay-at-home order came in place, I was actually in my van, so I have a camper van, and I had taken a few days off and went to Red Rocks to go climbing, and then learned of shelter in place, and places started closing, so I usually go to gyms to shower. And there were no more showers. So decided to come back home, and it was easier for work to be able to have like Wi-Fi access and not be in a small space on the road. So the first few weeks being home was really challenging. I think everyone missed being at work and socializing and seeing colleagues. But in the last, I think like it's been 6 weeks now, we've all really adjusted, and I've been hearing from other colleagues that they actually kind of like working from home. And I think I do too. And I've learned to create my own routine where I can do work efficiently at home, and then I get out of the house like twice a day so that I don't feel like super claustrophobic in my little apartment in the city.
Yeah, find that balance.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And actually, I really want to go back to your van, and we will talk about that because this is something I'm so excited for you, and something I'm just so excited about in general. So before we even go there, so why don't we give everybody a bit of background on your story and dive right into kind of an overview with some of the key moments that happened as the story unfolded, how you grew up, you know, all that exciting.
Sure. So backstory is the reason I know you, Yvonne, is because we went to elementary school together.
Yeah.
We went to school in Toronto in the suburb of Scarborough. And we met when we were like this tall. And I grew up with an immigrant family. My family's from Hong Kong and Vietnam. And they had moved to Toronto and had me. And then luckily, a lot of my family moved to Toronto. So I grew up having a lot of family at home, and I speak Cantonese very fluently. All four of my grandparents lived in Toronto. And yeah, I was really fortunate to have so much love and support around me. And my mom would actually, also I'm an only child. And my mom would tell me stories about like how much energy I would have as a little kid. And there wasn't much that she could, like there weren't many activities that would make me just like sit and like, you know, focus and not do much. So maybe I had slight like, you know, hyperactive like ADD. And she'd be like, yeah, you were like carrying like your diapers into the house and you were running around all the time. And I think it's true. Like I went through a lot of different like hobbies and none of them really stuck. I was always like, too antsy to be in dance class because the teacher would say like spin once and I would spin like 3 times.
That's amazing.
So there was this one class or one like extracurricular activity that I discovered in grade 6. And Yvonne, you might remember this. There was a ceramics like after school club, and I joined that club. And that day I made 2 little like flower vases and I brought them home and I showed my mom and I was like, look at this, it's so fun. Like we have a kiln at school and like this is clay.
Yeah.
And I think she recognized something there. And then she enrolled me into like community ceramics class. So I actually stuck with that up until like high school. And then I eventually worked at this like community ceramics studio. I worked at their art gallery, and then I did like administrative stuff. And I actually worked there up until like I was in college, and still in college. I was like studying while working at this art gallery ceramics
Oh,
place.
wow. So you were there
So
for a while, yeah.
I had been doing ceramics for a really long time, and this was like the activity that my mom, she just saw how I thrived in it, and like I would just sit down for hours and like make and build something.
Yeah.
So she was like, "Oh, this is great! Like now,
more of this, more of this."
yeah, more of this." She loves it. She's not jumping around, and she's in like control. So I think that's when I first learned about like design and looking at form and function. Because when you're creating like a cup, right? Like you're thinking, actually, here, I have a dish. I have a dish that I made with some strawberries in it. So
Beautiful.
when you are designing something, you're thinking about obviously how it looks and how it feels, and you're thinking about the form, right? Like, how is this going to be used? What kind of food do I want in it? Do I want like a lip? How does that feel when it's in your hand? So you're thinking about form and function. So that kind of led me to more curiosity about design. And then actually, when I was in grade 8, my art teacher had told my parents that I should go to art school for high school. And I was like, yes, like, Mom, please, like, I would love to go to art school.
Yeah.
I would even want to like visit this art high school, and they talked about like how everything in our world has been designed, like even the bus shelter. Like someone had actually thought about the design of the bus shelter and the form and the function of it. So I was really excited, but my parents said no. They wanted me to have a normal high school experience and not be specialized in something, and they wanted me to have a broader education. So I was very bummed out by that. And but it turned out all right. Like I got to take classes like calculus, physics, which I really liked, English, so on, like the regular curriculum. But I did take art class throughout high school. And I also took like an architecture class, so I learned how to do some like CAD modeling and like designing houses. Also, I really liked The Sims. I loved SimCity, but like The Sims where you actually like build interiors. So I would spend like summers sitting in front of the computer for like 2-3 hours on end, just like building interiors of people's houses. And then I would like find these special codes online to like get like more cash flow so I could like build more of the house.
This is amazing. Okay.
So that led me to wanting to study interior design or industrial design. And when I first told my parents, they were adverse to it. They were like, are you sure? Like, I'm not sure you should do like an art degree. Like, both my parents kind of came from a traditional background, like banking and insurance. So they were both kind of like, we don't know about this. But luckily at the time, and I think this was around maybe 2000, design thinking started to become a topic that was widely discussed in business. And my dad reads a lot of business on like magazines and watches business television like obsessively. So he was hearing about this thing, and he was like, okay, like if like IBM and if like these big companies, Fortune 500 companies are like seeing design and the value of it and how it's helping businesses grow, then maybe there's something here. So that's when things kind of changed and my parents became more supportive of my passion for like creating and making. So we went to visit like a few different schools, one including OCAD, where I ended up going to study industrial design. And I was there for 5 years. I did an extended year to do internships and then additional courses. And I graduated with an industrial design degree. And then I'll tell you a little thing about my experience there. So in my 3rd year, I spent a summer in Tanzania. And the reason I was there was because I think it was like maybe a year or 9 months before that, I was at this conference where I met someone named Graham, who's still friends with me on Instagram. And he had told me about his experience of creating prosthetics while in Tanzania, and he had spent a summer there. And he was a med student at the time. And I was like, this sounds really cool. Like, you got to go to a different country. I've never been to Africa. And you got to make something. And like, I love making things. So he connected me with the right people. I ended up spending the summer there. It was incredible. I got to work with my hands, and I felt like I got to really use like, you know, what I love doing, making, designing, to really like help people. So I made prosthetics for kids with disabilities, and I made like casts, I made splints for them, I made shoes for people who had like, you know, things look different down there. So I really got the opportunity to do something that was really meaningful. And it was super meaningful when I remember this one time where like I made this leg. It took me like maybe 2 weeks, for this little boy. I think he was like 8, and I like gave him the leg after multiple fittings and like working on it, and then he put it on, and a couple days later I saw him on the soccer field playing, and he was having fun. He was so happy.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, wow, like it just felt so good. So I think that's like the thing that I'm like always like chasing after, is like, where can I use my skills to provide, like, to do something meaningful for others. And that's when I feel the happiest.
And sorry, just to dive deeper on that experience in Tanzania, I'm curious, how did you make the prosthetics when you were there?
Yeah, so I worked with the Salvation Army, and they got a lot of donations from the UK. So they were affiliated with like their UK like department, something like that. So they would donate prosthetics, they would bring it from the UK, and then we would like resize them, reconstruct them, and then we would make the fitting to like, say someone's like stump of their arm, and then we would make that fitting. But mostly I was working on prosthetic like legs, and then also shoes, because some of the kids had polio. So they would have like, you know, their feet don't look like ours. They may have like 10 toes. So you can't put a regular shoe on someone like that. They need a custom shoe.
Yeah.
So I learned to make shoes and sandals and prosthetics.
Because you were in heaven. You were like, yay, I'm making so many things. But I'm actually curious. So then has this experience really influenced the direction in which you want to go or are going? Because I know that you've mentioned in the past, maybe you can highlight a little bit about the palliative care that you feel strongly about. So maybe you can shed some light in terms of like those experiences and what you gained from them, I guess, and where you hope to go with that.
Yeah, so that story is actually connected to Tanzania. So that was my 3rd year of college, and I was supposed to graduate in my 4th year of college. So while I was in Tanzania, I was building these prosthetics. I was also thinking about what I would do for my final year thesis project. And that was the project that you have to do in order to graduate from the industrial degree program. So I was hoping to do something around potable water. So I was visiting like some villages, I was talking to locals, I was talking to organizations that were doing that in Tanzania. And my biggest learning was that I couldn't design something from Canada for users in Tanzania because I wasn't in Tanzania. And I heard stories where like there was like a Swiss group that like went to Tanzania, and they like built these new wells. And usually women like travel miles and miles and miles a day to go get water from the river, but the Swiss group came in and they put in some wells closer to their home. And they were like, this is great. Like, we're helping people, we're enabling them to have potable water closer to their home. And a year later, they went back to visit and they saw that the women were not using those the wells that they built. And the reason behind that was because the women actually liked having time to like go to the river and time away from their family and social time with other ladies at the river. So what I learned from this experience is that they didn't understand the social context. And it's very important as a designer or researcher or any creator to really know like the context of the people using your product or your solution. So learning this and going home to Canada, I felt very lost at the time. I was like, well, I just made this like 3-month trip to Tanzania. I thought I was going to come up with this great thesis idea. And now I'm like, I don't know if I can do this without like having access to my end users. And that's a very important part of design. So I came back to Canada. I was talking to my professor at the time, and I worked at his lab. And I was like, look, I don't know what I'm going to do for my thesis project. And I like a lot of my other friends like in the program already know what they're going to do. And I remember like having this feeling of like lost uncertainty. And like, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I can graduate. Like, I don't know what I'm going to work on. So he presented an opportunity to work at his lab next year and not graduate on my 4th year, and instead work at the lab, do some internships. And he had this partnership with a hospital. And he already knew I was interested in health and well-being. So he connected me with this local hospital where we were working with their palliative care department. So for the next year, I spent time at palliative care, talking to the nurses, talking to people who were like running the facility, talking to patients about their experience of palliative care. So for those who don't know what palliative care is or hospice, it's basically like people are at the end of their lives and they may have a terminal illness, and they're there to like have that comfort before they pass, right? So there are people who take care of them. And it's all about like comfort at the end of your life. So with that, I'd really tried to empathize and understand that experience. And I remember having one conversation with a nurse, and she was like, well, if there's like a few things that you could work on, but maybe you could think about like the furniture and specifically like the bedside table for patients, because everyone becomes bedridden. And it's a very hopeless feeling that you get when you become bedridden and you can't reach for belongings, right? Like a normal side drawer has drawers that you have to kind of bend over and reach and open, but someone who's bedridden can't do that. So that created this opportunity for me to design furniture for palliative care patients.
Wow. And then, okay, and then from there, because obviously I can sense that your passion is very much in like the research and the empathizing and the understanding of the user. And so how does that apply kind of like what you do today? Obviously it's very related, but I'm just curious to kind of just draw it into today.
Yeah, so that was about 8-9 years ago. So since then, I had moved to New York City right after I graduated, and actually with that palliative care project, I got a job at Smart Design. I was actually there for an internship, and I was there for 8 months. It was an extended internship. Usually it's 4 months. And that's when I learned more about like digital product design and research and industrial design. So I remember asking for a project. I was like, I'm really interested in this like digital thing. Like I know it's like really taking off. People have smartphones now. Can I have that opportunity to like maybe work on a project that related to that? So they put me on a project. It was actually a project with Amex, and it was looking at like the mobile experience. So that project was really my first like digital product design project. So because I had a design degree, even though I was a research intern, I was able to like do some sketching on the computer of like the mobile like flows and designs. And then at the end of that internship, they couldn't offer me a full-time position. So well, before I left, I started like doing networking. And I had visited San Francisco before while I was in college, and I had heard so much about Silicon Valley and how much is happening here and the tech boom and all that stuff. So I came over here during Thanksgiving, also on a project with smart design. But I started like talking to people. I started networking, and I had some connections to a place called Adaptive Path. I went in, I talked to them. It was a really good conversation. I really loved the people I met there, Toy and Henning. And then I remember flying back to New York, and I got a call from their like recruiter HR person, and they were like, "Hey, we really love meeting you. We would love to like fly you back to do an interview." And I was so happy at that point. Like I was in a taxi ride from like JFK to downtown, and I just remembered feeling like so thrilled because I was like, "Wow, like I could actually probably have a job in San Francisco doing something I'm
You're like,
really
yes, 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 yes.
yeah." And Adaptive Path was like one of the best places that I could end up at that time. And it was just really well known for experience design and service design. And they run a lot of conferences about this space and industry. And they were really like leaders in this space. So, short story, I flew back, interviewed. I landed a job. I was super excited. This was like my first design job. And I remember like buying myself a watch, like this really cool modern watch, just to like I'm gonna remember this moment, and like this is a gift to myself.
That's amazing.
So January that year, I moved to San Francisco, and I've been here since then. I've had multiple different jobs now. I've worked in consulting with Adaptive Path for clients like Airbnb and Sonos, a few banks. And that's where I really like built my foundation of research and design. And there I was doing this hybrid role of research and design. And then 2 years later, the company was acquired by Capital One. So I was working at Capital One for a month, and it kind of didn't feel natural to me. Like I didn't really kind of come to San Francisco and join Adaptive Path to work for a bank. Sorry, Capital One, if you're listening. May have changed now, but at the time, I was kind of like, this is weird, not really for me. And what I felt like I was missing at the time was this experience of actually taking design strategy and making it into a real product. So I ended up working at a company called Granular, and I was doing digital product design. I was creating software for farmers to manage their farms. And then a year after that, I joined Uber, and that had been a roller coaster for like 3.5 years. So at Uber, I was a designer for about 2 years. I was working on the driver experience. It was a lot of fun. I was able to do a lot of like international kind of research work, and my audience was very international. So it was really exciting to build something that was used around the world.
Wow.
And then while I was at Uber, I made the switch to research, and that's what I currently do. So I had made the switch because I was really passionate about the research part and really like building the right thing for people. And I felt like that was really where I wanted to grow. And I was less interested in like the like pixels and like creating specs, that kind of thing. And I was really interested in like kind of the bigger picture, but also like building meaningful product that people would use. So I switched over to the research side of things, and I was doing research for Uber Eats for a year and a half, and that was amazing. Again, like I got to do so much, and I traveled to so many places around the world, and I was researching mostly restaurants. So I got to go visit restaurants and like understand like the front end and back end of a restaurant business and how they take orders, and then talk to like entrepreneurs about what it's like to run a business. That was amazing, and I'm really grateful for that experience. And
Wow.
then fast forwarding to now, a lot has happened. So I now work at Flexport, and Flexport does supply chain like managing. So they help companies move their goods from where it's made to where it's sold over um, like air and ocean and trucking. So all different types of modes and many different companies in different industries. So now I'm there and I'm doing research. I'm leading research there. With a team of 4, and we work with designers and product managers, and yeah, that's
Oh
kind
my
of
God,
where
that's
I've
yeah,
led me.
it's so interesting. Your experience is so broad as well, which is really nice because you can really touch on so many. You've touched on so many different industries. So we'll jump right back. We'll come back to that actually. But before we even go further on the on work, there's something that I wanted to ask you because you mentioned at the beginning that you were between interior design and industrial design, correct?
Yeah.
What made you actually pick industrial design? Was there something about it?
I thought I and my parents thought industrial design would give me more opportunities.
Mhm.
I could be designing for so many different industries, from healthcare to like tech to furniture. Like there were just more avenues for me to explore and go down,
Yeah,
whereas
makes
interior
sense.
design felt more limited.
Okay, that makes sense.
Although
Yeah,
I'm
because
sure,
I was like remembering you talking about Sims and you making the houses and all this other stuff, and I was like,
yeah,
so I was curious what made you, but that makes sense because it probably brought into your skill set a little bit more than the other one. So actually, one thing I want to touch on, which you talked about earlier in your story, which was about the ceramics and that you loved being hands-on, and I've always known you as a woman with so many like talents. You're so hands-on. You have so many interests. Plus, you also have a full-time job. So I'd like to go into more detail about this and also dig deeper on your philosophy of you call it work-life integration, which I thought was really interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how you integrate work or vice versa, how you integrate your hobbies into work, depending on how you see it. So do you mind telling us a little bit about how you do that? Because you have like so many projects at once sometimes. I'm like, how is your head still on?
yeah, yeah. So that is probably my strength and weakness, is that I love doing a lot of different things and being creative and making. But it can also be a weakness because sometimes I feel like I'm spread too thin and I have a hard time really focusing on one thing. But I think that is actually how I work and how I create synergy. Is like I work on one thing and then I work on another thing and then I work on another other thing, and I don't get bored, and then I can switch back to this other thing. So I go through a lot of like phases. Uh, I had like a jewelry goldsmithing phase, and that's still kind of on the burner, and I still do that. Like I just made wedding rings for a friend a couple months ago, and then now I'm on this like candle making phase. So I've been making candles as a fundraiser for COVID-19 for personal protective equipment for healthcare workers.
Mhm.
And I've kind of been on that swing. I just like set up a website 2 days ago and made my first like sale to someone who I've never met before. Prior to that, it's been family, friends, and colleagues supporting. This is one of my candles. This one is called Solitude. This is a bristlecone pine from California. So actually, bristlecone pines are some of the oldest trees in the world. They're like thousands and thousands of years old, and they are high up in mountains. They're usually kind of standing on their own. And this is an illustration that I did for my candle. And this candle has a wooden wick. It's made of soy and coconut wax. And the scent profile is sugar pine, sage, juniper, and spruce. And it's my favorite one. It smells lovely. I also have another candle called Brighter Days, and that one is the fundraiser candle for COVID-19. 50% of the sales goes towards transporting personal protective equipment to frontline healthcare workers. So check out my website. We can link it. And yeah.
Amazing. I'll actually make sure to include it because not only is it for a good cause, but also sounds like it smells incredible. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also excited to get one myself, a couple of them myself. So.
So for me, what work life integration means is like, it's this like flow of, I mean, you could say I'm constantly working, but some of these things that I'm working on is giving me energy so that I can do these other things. And both things give me energy. I just can't do them like solely focus on one thing at a time. Like I kind of have to do this switch thing, and that's how I integrate that together.
So if we talk more practically, I'm curious, like, how do you actually manage your time? Like, what does it look like?
Okay, so it looks something like with stay-at-home, shelter-in-place. In the morning, I get up and then I work out with my friends online for like 45 minutes, and then I start working. And work can be a multitude of things. It can be setting up research interviews. It can be coming up with like concept designs for testing. It can be writing insights, things like that. It could be a little bit of like managing my team. That's something I'm trying out at work, is like this individual contributor and managing path. So things around like setting up our team for success, metrics, that kind of thing. And then for lunch, I love to cook. So I think that's like another like side project hobby. I just love making things. So I like to cook. It's creative. It brings me energy. And then after that, I go back to work. And then sometimes I'll take a break in the middle to like maybe pour a candle, or like draw a label for my candle, or like work on some creative side project. Maybe it's like fixing something in my van. And then I'll go back to work. And then after work from like 5:30 to like 6:30, maybe 7, I'll go and work out. So I might go on a bike ride, I might go for a run or a hike, and then I'll come back, and then I might work on my candle business, and I might like pour a batch of candles. Um, and then at the end of that, I have like half hour before I go to bed. So I'm like usually watching, like lately it's been like YouTube videos on like van life, or like Stephen Colbert, who's been really funny, and he's like covering, news and stuff. So kind of getting in touch with what's happening in the world, but through comedy. And then I go to bed. And then the next day I wake up, and it just kind of repeats. And I actually kind of like the simplicity of life right now,
Yeah,
because it's
I
kind
totally hear you.
of every day. Not that I love monotony, but like it's kind of nice having that rhythm. I do
Yeah.
miss going to restaurants and seeing friends though.
I know. I think we're all like, ah. So, to make this all possible, like to do all of this and manage your time this well, and like have, I guess, everything in little buckets. Are there certain sacrifices you have to make? Like, is there one that you could highlight that you're like, I tend to give up a lot of this to make this work? Like, are there certain sacrifices you make?
Um, well, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but I don't read books. Even though books are such a wealth of knowledge, I just can't seem to sit down with a book.
I'm
My
not
mind,
surprised with everything you've said. you can't get, you can't sit down and read a book because it's probably too slow, you know?
no, like I think there's so much I could like gain from reading, but it just doesn't happen. And if I do read, it'll be like 3 pages at a time. Um, so instead, I listen to podcasts, and I usually listen to podcasts when I'm on a walk or I'm like on a road trip driving somewhere.
That makes sense. That's so funny. And so in the process of you deciding which projects to work on, so for instance, you said that you've done some like making jewelry, and then I also saw you made a beautiful headboard. So you obviously do some woodwork, and now you're making candles, and you do ceramics and all this. So in the process of like deciding, do you have a process for deciding which projects you want to work on, and like when you switch between them? Like, because they clearly have an intention and a purpose. So I'm curious to, and do you ever run out of ideas?
No. No. I think there are times when I feel kind of lost, and I'm like, oh, like what do I do for the next like 2-3 years? Like, what's my life about? But I never run out of like side projects. Not that I can think of right now. So with projects with so many things going on, I just kind of just prioritize based on like um, if there's someone actually commissioning something from me, that's first priority. So maybe I'm making like rings for a friend. That is definitely a priority. And then the candle thing, like people have been ordering, so that's been a priority, and that's been really exciting because I've never sold so many candles in my life before. And with the van, I kind of have like a timeline for like since I bought it and different phases of the build. Um, the most latest priority for the van has been, so I installed these like wooden panels on the door, and uh, they kind of rattle when I'm driving. So because it's bothering me when I'm driving, I'm going to be working on that this weekend so that it's not rattling. But usually I pick things based on um, if there's someone who's commissioning work, if something is bothering me, and then if there's something I'm really excited to work on. Like I just feel some passion or like something inside that's like excited for it, and I follow that.
So what was behind the idea of the candles actually and raising money for the health? Oh my gosh, there's a term we're using now for I think they're called health heroes. I forget what they're called in the US. You guys have like a name. It's beautiful. It's
Frontline healthcare.
Yes. Um, so yeah, so how did that all come about and why candles?
So I guess I've always been kind of like a pyro. I like fire, whether it's or candles. And it was one of those like small project ideas that has always been sitting in the back of my mind. And I started making candles a few months ago with some friends. And then when COVID-19 and stay at home, shelter in place happened, I remember feeling very like almost like not contributing to it. Like I couldn't contribute. Like I wasn't like a doctor or a nurse, and there wasn't much I could do. And even at work, I asked like, is there anything that we could do to support the company? Because the company is shipping a lot of personal protective equipment. And we have a social impact org called flexport.org. And they were doing a lot of the shipping. And then they had spun up this fund where they were fundraising with celebrities to like pool together money to transport the PPE to hospitals and like people of need. And I think that was pretty unique in this world today because what I was hearing is like there's a lot of money flowing into this, and there are like masks and personal like safety equipment being made, but the transportation piece wasn't really figured out. And so that was really, our operating space. So I thought it was really great that flexport.org was able to identify the opportunity and then start this fund. And in the meantime, I was like feeling kind of useless. I was like, well, I'm not really doing anything here. And then something like clicked, and I was like, well, can I make something that could like help with this? And that's kind of how it happened.
It's so beautiful, your level of responsibility and action. I'm super inspired. It's true. A lot of people, can talk, but it's beautiful that you actually created something. And it was obviously right up your alley. So so on a day-to-day basis, like for your ideas, where do you have specific spots where you look for inspiration or ways to stay inspired?
I spend a lot of time on Instagram.
I think we all do.
I follow a few like makers, like entrepreneurs. Most of them are women, and I love looking at van builds and jewelry on Instagram. So I get a lot of inspiration looking at what other people are doing and also hearing their stories and their struggles as an entrepreneur and their successes. So I look there, and then in terms of lifestyle, I've been watching a lot of videos from Eamon and Beck. So they are a couple actually from Toronto, and they've been traveling for 3 years, and they are entrepreneurs. Like they started a tea business, and they also like make videos of their like trip in their van. They're currently quarantined in Toronto, but they're like building a new van. So in the last month that I've been quarantined at home, I have watched a lot of their videos and am inspired by their like willingness to just like go with things and not live like the traditional kind of life, right? Like they live on the road, like they're kind of living their own dream and they're just kind of going for it. So that has been inspiring.
Wow, yeah, it's true. It's you're right. It's always in the stories. It's always in like the building of, and it's yeah. And so actually, speaking of like entrepreneur, I always find this because I'm sure you've been asked or probably wondered, or people ask in, you know, some form or derivative of that. Have you ever thought of doing this as a full-time business? Or is the joy for you in the creation, and then if you made it a business, it would kind of take away from that? Like, how do you see that? I'm curious because I'm sure a lot of creatives or
Yeah.
people, you know, they come across that question.
Yeah. I think over the years I've gained a lot in being analytical and not just being creative. I'm kind of testing this out with the candles and that business. It's a lot more of operations now, right? Like I have a line of candle scents, and I drew like the labels and um, the like thinking through like the packaging and the online marketing stuff. But really, like online marketing isn't really like my sweet spot, nor is operations. So I'm kind of like testing the waters there. Another project, not that I have, you know, I have enough projects, but this one came about like a couple months ago. I have this app project, again, like thinking about how I can use like my skills and what I've learned in my career and like tying that to healthcare and well-being. I've been lightly dabbling on a side project about planning for one's end of life, or a loved one's end of life. So right now I'm in the like creative phase where I'm like exploring ideas. I'm sketching out like what those screens might look like. But the idea is I want to help people who are in need at that time. Like no one wants to plan a funeral or plan assets when a loved one has passed. That's like the last thing you want to do. It's tedious. You don't want to do it. It's sad. Like it's not, you know, you just don't have the energy for that. You don't really want to do that. So I've been thinking about like how to create a peaceful guided experience, whether you're the one who's passing or your loved one is passing, and you can take care of things.
Wow, I really look forward to that. I actually think it's true. You know, there's so much innovation that can come into that. And I mean, innovation is maybe the wrong word because you probably like, you know, someone passing, but so much beauty that can be brought into that experience. So then actually this brings up the question, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was that if you had one, and you would be open to sharing it with us, what is the bigger vision for what you'd like to do and where you'd like to go? Would it be more in this, obviously in this direction, would eventually?
I think it would be neat, to have my own business, working on something that I've been and am passionate about. I would like to explore that. I could see a few different paths that my life could go down in, right? Like I could continue doing like design and research work, and manage a team and be a leader in that space. I could also work on my own projects, and I could do both, or I could see like, if I did both, and which one kind of really held potential, and like where I felt the most energy, then I kind of decide that way. I guess the way I decide on what I work on is the demand for it, but also like just where I feel good about things, where I'm growing, right? Like, am I growing? If I'm not growing, are there opportunities to grow here? If not, like, maybe are there opportunities to grow elsewhere? Like, I'm always looking to grow and do something creative and meaningful with my time and energy.
Yeah, that's wow. Because I was actually going to say, because it's like, even with your projects, there's always so many options. And then even now, like I can see you have different options, but I can see that the underlying decision maker is really, how am I feeling? And is this pushing me to grow? And am I still growing? So, and for women that also, or men that also deal with a little bit of that, where it's like, you're so full of creative ideas and you have you don't even know sometimes which one to focus on. Do you have any experience for them? Like, how can they manage that? Like, how have you managed that? Because it's clearly something you've managed well.
Mm-hmm. I think just see what sticks, right? Like try things, try prototyping it, just try it out, see what your audience thinks of it, see how you feel about it. That's been my driver, right? Like I would try something like candle making, and then like turns out people support it and people like it. Or right now I'm like designing this app on the side, and I at some point I'm going to like start putting it out in the world and like get feedback, and then I will want to see like, is this something people would use? Are they excited about it? Do I still feel excited about it? So my advice would be, if you have a hunch or an idea, just go with it, try it out. Like, even if you have a 9 to 5 job, right? Like you still have time in the morning or like after work. I'm sure it's less if you have kids, right? But maybe you can like find a few hours here and there to like pursue something, try it out, get feedback, see if it sticks.
Mm-hmm. And actually, would you say that your role as a researcher, because you kind of also, you're right, you have this analytical hat that you can actually, and have trained yourself to put on. So when you do create something, are you ever afraid of like the fear of rejection or getting negative feedback, or someone saying, oh, your candle's like the worst, I hate it? Like, does it ever impair your ability to create or want to bring something out? Like, how do you manage those emotions?
So I used to, especially in college, I think when we were in critiques, right? Like people would give feedback, both positive and negative. And when they gave me negative feedback, like I would just like cringe inside and be like,
Yeah.
yeah, what a, like, I don't like this feedback, or like my design's terrible or something like that. And over time, from like mentorship from like professors and from like other people that I've worked with, and just like developing yourself as a researcher designer, you learn that the feedback is useful, right? Like it's useful to help you grow, because if someone doesn't like something, well, don't go down that path. Like change it and make it something that is appreciated, is valued. So now I take feedback and turn it into like constructive feedback, and then grow from it. Yeah. But before, like there were times when I was like bummed out
Yeah.
at negative feedback, and my advice would just be like, see it in a different perspective, right? See it as a way for you to grow, for you to learn from it, and create something even better.
Is there something you tell yourself to remind yourself not to take it personally?
Maybe that, right? I tell myself like it's not about me, it's about the thing, and I have control over the thing. So if the feedback was negative, I can do something about it. And then if I can't do something about it, that's okay too.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful, because I'm sure that a lot of people that, they're creatives, like they put their heart and passion and their souls into their work. And so it sometimes can be a little challenging to. So I can assume with work, that's really helped you kind of separate the two pools. So actually, I wanted to touch a little bit on Rey Ventura,
Mm-hmm. because
this gets me so excited. So can you tell us a little bit about Rey Ventura and what this whole project is about?
Yeah. So Rey Ventura was owned by my boyfriend and I, and we bought her in June last year, and we've been converting her into a camper van. When we first bought Rey, she's a cargo van, right? She's like a kidnapper van. There's nothing in it, no windows in the back. And we've been slowly converting it over the last 7-8 months. And it's been really a thrill to have that project, and to really like everything you put into it, you get to enjoy it, right? Like we go on road trips even though it's not finished. Like one of the first trips we had was a local trip to Berkeley. We had an air mattress in it. We didn't sleep very well, but we like really tried to use it and see like what it's like to put the bed here or put the bed here. And then, like imagine like if we had a kitchen here or like cabinets here. So we've been living in it and building it at the same time. And it is a creative outlet. And I've never built anything this big before. I'm kind of like, what was I thinking like when I first bought this van? Like, built a tiny house on wheels. Also, this is my first car, so I've never owned like a normal car, and now I
Never
have
mind. Yeah.
a cargo van.
Which you're
So
converting into a mini house. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm learning a lot about that. And like when my colleagues and friends talk about like working on their house, I can actually kind of relate to it. Even though my van is a van and not a house, I still understand like what a subfloor is and like what's involved in like plumbing and putting a wall up and electricity, that kind of thing.
This is so fascinating. So I'll actually insert a little video so people can actually see the tour that you gave me, so that they can actually get excited about it as well. So, sorry?
And one more thing I'll share is
Yeah.
the dream with Rey Ventura is that it becomes a studio space where I can do like digital work, but also do like work on my candles or work on jewelry. And it's kind of like a traveling studio. So I haven't mentioned this earlier, but I also rock climb. I do like outdoor rock climbing. So the dream is to be able to like be out in nature and like do all the fun outdoorsy things and also be creative in the van. So that is the vision for the van.
Actually, I didn't know that. That's actually really neat. So are you hoping to be able to make all the things that you do in, like, would you actually, as much of a workshop as you could put in it, you would?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's, and would it be like a weekend getaway thing, or do you ever plan to do like big trips, or is that all kind of included?
Yeah, so right now it's been weekend trips. The longest trip we took was right before shelter in place, and that was a week-long trip. And that's when I learned that, like, I mean, I knew that not showering for a week is really tough. I actually experienced not showering for a week, and it was.
Oh my God.
So currently it is like a weekender van, but at some point I would love to take it to South America, to like Chile and Argentina, and do like maybe 2-3 month long road trip in it.
Wow. Wow, this is so amazing. Yeah, like I said, I'll share the video, because even just the vision that you shared with me is just so it's gonna be fun. I can imagine you're gonna really enjoy that.
Hello, I'm Evie. We're in San Francisco, and I'm going to give you a tour of Rey Ventura, my van. Rey Ventura is a Dodge ProMaster 136 wheelbase, which is from that wheel to this wheel. And as we enter in, you can see we have laminate flooring, and this is our queen size bed with heated blankets because it gets cold out there in the forest, and very comfy down sheets. And over here is the kitchen slash workspace. So this is where meals are prepared, and this is also where I've been working since COVID-19 started with shelter in place. So this is my like second home, second studio space. In here you'll see this is the stovetop, so we can take this out when we need to cook. We have some water. That is the pantry, more pantry items, and my clothes here. This tabletop is temporary. We are going to put in a live edge wood slab once this COVID thing is all over and we can go to the wood mill again. And here we have organized utensils, stationery, face masks, and then we have more storage here. And of course we have these clips because vans move and we have to keep the doors from flying out and slamming when we're driving. Up here is a vent, so we're able to get fresh air. And here is passenger seat, driver's seat. This is a nice little feature where we can clip in our phone and see where we're driving to. And then this is the fridge. So we got this as a gift for Christmas, and it's pretty great. We can store like at least 3 days of food in there. And then eventually there's going to be a wall here that separates the living space from the garage space. And in the garage space we have some camping gear, some food, and then we have tools in the back that I'll show you in a bit. There's also bikes here. And if you're wondering how I go to the bathroom, well, in an emergency, that's the bathroom. Let's go take a look at the back. safety first and more tools and electrical work. So that's it. We have solar at the top, we have lithium batteries that are hooked up to the car batteries, and that's how we keep the lights on in here. Thanks.
So going back, because you're also adding a lot of design and being very intentional with how Rey Vantura looks and its practicality, and as much as you can, all these elements. So something that I actually, because you brought it up a lot, and I think something I want to touch on is, what is design for you? Like, if you were to encourage people to see design in a certain way, what would you say about it? And like, when people are starting to design things for themselves or others, where would you put their headspace at? And research as well, actually, because it's a big part of what you do as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah.
Because there's design in so many different scales, right? Like there's designing a tiny house on wheels for yourself, where like you're the end user, you know what you need and want, and you're thinking about like the limitations of like space and your own needs. So like an example is like, you know, this island or countertop that I'm building, like it is also a desk space and a space where I'm cooking. So I'm thinking about like, what do I need it to do? And how can it have like 2-3 different functions? And then you have the other end of this scale spectrum, which is like designing for millions of people. So there you are understanding not yourself, but like someone else. And it could be someone else's life that you've never even experienced. So this a lot of the time applies to like designing for businesses, like B2B instead of B2C. So in that instance, you really have to understand that end user and empathize for, you know, their life. And like, maybe it's like understanding their workflow, understanding their goals, understanding their challenges. And so if you're talking about design for businesses or design on that spectrum, designing for like scale, then you have to understand these different segments of users and their needs. And then from that understanding, then you can come up with creative solutions for them. So do you see this like spectrum, right? Like, are you designing for yourself? You know your own needs. Are you designing for mass market? You need to understand their needs and create solutions for them.
And obviously all this within as much detail as possible, because like you mentioned intensity, it was important to understand that they actually enjoyed the walk. So then how would you describe or define design then?
A design, I think, is creating for someone else and understanding their context and their needs and coming up like with creative solutions for them. Versus when I think about making art or craft projects for myself, like it's the act of creation that brings me joy or energy.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people easily toss out the word design and they think it's like aesthetics, you know, like just make it look pretty kind of thing. But you're right, there's so much behind the functionality of it that supports that design as well. So because one of the things that I read about you, that you have a system called empathy-driven product development. It's a process, and I read about this on your profile. And so what are some tips that you'd give entrepreneurs looking to make meaningful products and services?
My tip would be, again, like understanding the context of the user, what their needs are, what their pain points are, what their world looks like today. And one thing I love doing, this is a research design methodology, is called co-design. So that means you are designing the end solution with the end user. So you may come up with a few different ideas and then you share that with them and you ask them like, you know, I showed you 3 ideas, like what do you like about each of them? And let's create like your ideal solution. And that seems to work really well and get you to like a meaningful product, because you do have this shared kind of understanding and creation. So try that if you're an entrepreneur and try to know how it goes.
Well, no, I find that that's just so important. I really wanted to highlight that because I think it's something you do so well. And obviously it's also a big part of what you do at work. So people can understand that world a little bit better. So what would you say is your definition of success? Like, how is it different from when you were in university to now? And like, how has it evolved for you that, as you're evolving in your career, and how would you say that's evolved, and how does that affect like your satisfaction, everything that you're doing?
So I think when I was younger, success to me, and my parents stressed a lot about like career. And I think that's because they were immigrants. Like they came to Canada, they wanted to build a life there. They wanted me, their daughter, to build a life. So that had a lot of influence on what success meant to me then. And now that I'm here, I feel like, I'm pretty content with my career, and I'm thinking about like the future going forward. And again, I always think about like what is exciting to me, like what gives me joy, right? Like, am I waking up excited about doing whatever I'm going to be doing? Do I feel like I'm growing, whether it's in my career or like as a human being? Like, one of those things was like travel. I love to travel, and I love to travel because it allows me to see how other people live, and I'm very privileged to be able to do that. So that was part of the definition, I think, for a few years. And then now I'm looking at like impact. And if you do some reading online, like people talk about legacy. So towards like the later part of people's lives, they think about like, what is the legacy they're leaving behind, whether it's like for their family or for the world. And so I think I'm starting to like think about that, maybe a little early. I mean, I just hit my 30s. So hopefully I have more years to live. Your goal of living to 120, so I still have many more years to come. But I do want to think about like, what is the impact that I could have on my loved ones, like my parents, my family in Toronto, my friends. And like, if I have a family one day, like what can I do for my family? Like I want them to be happy and healthy and succeed. And then, what can I do for the larger community? So there's these different scales.
Oh my goodness.
Off, so you're not hearing this knocking in the background.
Actually, it's true. I was like, what is that? It's going to go da, da, da. And I was like, amazing.
Okay, all right, it should be gone.
Amazing. So if you could boil it down to, I know there's probably many pieces, but like if you were to just really distill, if it's possible for you to distill it to one, what would be the one thing you'd attribute your success to so far?
Maybe it's listening to your gut and that hunch, that like little voice inside. And every time I've listened to it, it has brought me somewhere good. While I was doing palliative care work, I learned that one of the biggest regrets for people is not pursuing that gut, not pursuing that thing they thought they should have pursued. And so I try to really listen when I get that sense of like, okay, like it's time to move on, or like this thing's really exciting. Like I should like go to this like rock fair in Arizona, and, like go check out all these cool rocks from miners. People who are mining, not like miners. So just following that gut, that sense of excitement, that like compass, right? But that north pointing arrow.
Oh, that's so resonates with me, because I feel like I've always been guided by my gut as well. So I'm like, just honing in on that message. So before we close, I wanted to ask you two more questions. And the first one is there something you're currently working to improve within yourself? If there's something, perhaps right now you have other focuses, so
the candle thing, I've never really run a business before outside of, I've never run a business before. So that is new and challenging, and I want to kind of see that through. Sometimes I feel this like, I guess like kind of lack of excitement for like the operations of it, right? Like printing, mailing labels, and like taking the boxes to the USPS store. Like that's not super thrilling, but like I know it's part of this bigger thing, so I do it. So I've been like trying to push myself and like grow in that way. The other
That's a
thing
big one.
is I'm trying to work on being less stubborn. Um, I told many times by my family and friends that I can be quite stubborn, and I'm actively trying to be less of that. Yeah, like
Amazing.
again, I think it is like there are pros and cons to it, right? Like
Yeah, I was
because
gonna
I'm
say.
stubborn, I'm able to like stick to something and like push forward with it. Like if I see a vision or something I want, right? Like I will go after it. But that can get in the way of some things. So
But it's true. But I feel like you almost need that because I find that a lot of people are afraid to show that vulnerability in the development stage, which you're so comfortable with, you know. And I think it's nice that you can see the bigger vision. So, um, so last thing. So how do you take care of yourself? So you have so many projects and you're is that how you'd say you take care of yourself, or do you kind of see that separately? Like do you have any self-love rituals, or how do you stay sane?
exercise. So I love rock climbing, and I'm like so antsy right now because I can't do it. I can't rock climb, but I can do yoga, and I can go on bike rides, and I can go on hikes. So exercising really helps. Ensuring I have that balance. Like if I feel like I've spent too much time in front of my computer doing like, work, then I know like, all right, it's time to go pour some candles. It's time to go for a walk. It's time to like go to the grocery store and like cook something. So it's having, juggling these different things to like keep my own energy like up and running.
Optimal, yeah. Amazing. This is so great. So I just want to ask you one last thing, which is there any content out there you'd recommend for people? Anything that inspires you? Anyone you follow?
Well, Eamon and Beck, they have this really great channel on YouTube. They're also on Instagram. I really enjoy watching their shows. They're just so full of like positive energy and very uplifting. Um, and they live in a van and they're entrepreneurs. So go check them out.
Amazing. I'll put them in the show notes so people can follow along. And how can people find you?
I am on Instagram, so we can share my Instagram handle. You can also email me. I love meeting people and like having, well, can't have coffee right now, but we can have like video. Yeah, I love people. I love meeting others, sharing ideas, sharing experiences. So you can
Amazing.
email me, find me on Instagram.
I'll make sure to leave those notes below so people can actually do that. So thank you so much, Evi. I'm so, it's funny. I always like think, you just blow my mind every time I speak to you. I'm always like so infused with the energy you have for all the projects that you do and your creativity and where you source them and you just how you manage. It's amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for sharing your passion and for just continuing to create so much magic and beauty. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for reaching out after so many years and reconnecting. Like it's really a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to see you, and like I just remember not so long ago, like us as little kids and where we're at now, and so much that you've done with your life as well, and this incredible effort that you're working on right now for women and like interviewing people. I think it's really fantastic, and it really spreads good energy and inspiration that we need, especially at times like this.
Yeah, it's so true. Anyway, thank you so much, Evi. And guys, was that not incredible? I really love Kelly because she's just an all-around powerful powerhouse of a woman. She's really, her level of responsibility, her level of design, and just consideration for the things that she does, and just the passion that she commits to life, and like all her hobbies. If you heard the whole thing, you'd be blown away with everything she's done. I really, really admire her. I think she really shows us that sometimes we can, look up to the entrepreneurial life as this big woo-woo, but sometimes that's not really where we're happiest. And I really appreciate that in her journey, she really just flows. She allows herself to grow as things evolve in her life. And you know what? She's happy, she's fulfilled, she's successful, she's doing well. and she's clearly producing a lot of beautiful things. So I'm so happy to have had you on the show. Thank you, Kelly. I look forward to continuing to follow your journey. I will also leave your details in the notes below. And I really encourage everyone to support her fundraiser right now, as well as her candle company called Trail Essence. And yeah, until next time, friends.